tell us a bit about who you are and the kind of work you do, and how did you get into this unorthodox approach for health and well-being? It seems very interesting.
Yes, it's a question I'm often asked, and actually it's based on my life experience. I was born sick. My mother tells me the first 9 months of my life she was lucky if she got 2 consecutive hours of sleep. And I was kept alive on Western medicine drugs. I was dead several occasions, if not for Western medical care. But I was always getting sick. Never died, but always getting sick. And no energy. Then I went to school in England and ironically encountered through a healer there an Englishman. Actually, he was Scottish and his wife was English. The Asian approach, which is that you learn to use the body the way it was designed to be used. And through that learning, converted from being chronically sick to being chronically well. I haven't had even a Panadol in over 40 years.
Wow.
So that was my life experience. Now what I've tried to do with that is to create a program that other people can make the same journey, not from chronic sickness, but just from low energy. Because even if you don't have a health problem, if you learn to use the body optimally, your performance improves. So there's that whole range of things that can be done better. Based on this experience of converting from being chronically sick to being chronically well.
So Ranjan, what kind of response or the results you kind of get from your patients?
That's interesting because with this approach, I'm acting like a coach.
Mm-hmm.
The patient has to run the race. I can't run the race for them. But we are used to, we are accustomed to, we are socially conditioned to, if something's wrong with our health, the doctor puts it right. So he is the one or she is the one who has to make the run. Completely different approach. And we're not used to having to do something ourselves. I mean, we think about diet and exercise. These are they're important, but they're the least important. There are many other factors. So when I get results, it's with people who have been open to doing some work themselves. And I've got strange results. I had a chap in Boulder, in Colorado. He was due for brain surgery the next morning, but his doctor took me in and said, do a treatment and see what happens. When they opened him up, they found that where the tumor had been on the scan, there was scar tissue indicating there had been a tumor, but there was no tumor, it had just healed, just like that. So there's one kind of result. The other, which I think is also indicative of the effectiveness of this kind of work, the Duchess of York in London became a patient of mine, and in the last year that I lived in England, she didn't miss one single appointment. 8 o'clock Friday morning, I was at Buckingham Palace like that. Then there was a research project at Harvard where they looked at whether the healing work that I do actually changed the energy of the samples that we used, and they found there was a measurable increase in energy. So there are different things like this that show, yes, it does work. But a lot of people look at it askance and say, yes, but how does it work? And that's the weak link. It's like when you don't understand the mechanism through which something like this can work, there's very little motivation to act on it.
Oh, astounding. Ranjan, like, people have been given such a remarkable way of transformation in terms of their health and well-being. Why do you think people still cling on to the old ways? Like, why do you think they're reluctant to sort of accept the Eastern approach to medicine, health and well-being?
Partly because Western science has such a high reputation, but I think more critically it's that we don't take into account the fact that the brain is programmed. Let me give you an illustration of programming, where when I say program, what I mean is that you can take the same piece of information, the same data, and depending on the program, interpret it, draw completely different conclusions. So, for example, I was once invited to Sydney to address the Australian and New Zealand nuclear medicine society. And I said to them, now I've flown thousands of miles to come to you. Imagine you flying thousands of miles to some village where you're put in charge, you're legally responsible for their health. And the natives have a traditional medicine that is in competition. Now, you find over a period of being there that their traditional medicine is killing more people than any of the diseases that occur in that village. And I said to them, now you are legally responsible. What do you say about that traditional medicine? And the response was, ban it. It's killing more people than any of the diseases. How can this be healthcare? And then I said to them, now I want you to watch how your programming will change the data. Because the traditional village I'm talking about, the traditional medicine I'm talking about happens to be biomedicine, and the natives are US citizens. And the statistical information we have for 2001 is that prescription medicine given to you by the doctor, not over-the-counter stuff, killed more people in 2001 in the United States than heart disease, which is rated as the number one killer, cancer. Right? Now what do you say? And not one of them was prepared to say that. That's an example of the way in which the brain is programmed. Same data, opposite conclusions, simply because of the program. That has got nothing to do with the validity of the data. So one of the things I try to do with people is to get them to identify what is my programming. See, for example, in 2013, the New Scientist published that meditation has been shown to change your genetic inheritance from less healthy to more healthy. Right? That is a genetic shift. Now, typically in our society, if you say it's genetic, it means nothing can be done about it. Because no pharmaceutical can touch it, but meditation can. Right? But we don't take any notice of this. And the reason is that our concept of a human body doesn't allow for a mechanism where meditation can impact your genes. So it's that lack of a mechanism that's the problem. Now physics is telling us that actually the chemical approach to the body is pretty primitive, it's very superficial. That underneath that, the body is run by an internet of light. Now if that's the case, that's a mechanism through which to understand how meditation affects it. So again, in my workshops, what I try to do is to share with people what actually is the concept of the human body that science now gives us, and what are the mechanisms we can then discover that will explain how these things happen. Then you get motivated to actually take the action, do the things that will change your health, from being sick or depressed to being chronically well and having high levels of energy.
If you could just elaborate more on talking about your workshops, Ranjan. If I were to come to one of your workshops, how is it going to help me?
Yeah. See, what happens in a workshop is it's a mix of something practical and something theoretical. So we will address, I have a couple of videos, this business of how the brain is programmed, and try and identify what are the things that need to change in your thinking based on the most modern research. But then there's also some practical stuff where we do a certain amount of work on breathing, a certain amount of work on stretching. These are the things that underpin effective meditation. So the idea is that you actually learn how to meditate effectively through coming to a workshop, and also change the thinking, moving from what I call a flatter picture of the body to the most modern picture of the body, where you will then understand mechanisms that allow for these things to be effective.
Interesting.
Does that give you a picture of what happens in a workshop?
Yes, very much, and I look forward to coming to one of your workshops very soon.
Oh, very well.